And we are live, if everything worked, hopefully. Cool. Well, welcome everyone. My name is Dani. I work at Estuary. I lead the marketing function and do a lot of data work. And joining me here is Ben, aka Seattle Data Guy. How are you doing, Ben?
Doing well. I feel like you need to say that, you've been working in data engineering for a while as well. You do marketing now, but data engineering was a big part of what you did.
Yeah, I did more data engineering than marketing. And when I introduce myself as a marketing person, I think it immediately undermines my credibility. So I did a decade of data engineering and just recently shifted into marketing.
Yeah.
And I saw that you've been very busy these past few months. You've been on a world tour, at least that's what it seemed like. A lot of in-person events.
Yeah.
How are those going?
They're going great. Not as much as obviously Joe Reese. I just saw him. He happened to come to Denver, and I did a happy hour a few days ago, and it was good to see him. It was cool to catch up. And if he finally felt maybe a little caught up on some of the jet lag, because I don't know, I feel like whenever I catch him, he's always, as he put it, I think he said he's always like 3 jet lags behind. But yeah, no, it was fun. It was good to see people everywhere. SF, London, Denver here. I feel like I did Seattle as well. So yeah.
Nice. Those are pretty cool. And are you going to do more of these next year?
Yeah, I think I want to keep doing them. I want to try to get back to doing the Denver ones. I think it's good to get out of my house. Otherwise, I just stay in my house and kind of do the same thing every day. And so I think it's good to at least force myself locally to do them if I don't do them outside. But I'm sure we'll do more.
Totally makes sense. And Estuary is also going to do a lot more events next year. So looking forward to that. But today we are here to talk about data ingestion, data integration for Snowflake. It is an evergreen topic that I think every data person who at some point in their career interacted with Snowflake had to deal with. Most common use case is moving data into Snowflake, but there are some cases where you have to actually extract data out of Snowflake and plug it into another system. This discussion will be mostly centered around getting data into Snowflake and what tools data engineers and data analysts have to do this, and the trade-offs between them. We'll touch on a lot of things like total cost of ownership, batch versus real-time, ETL versus ELT, maybe going into a bit more detail on all the Snowflake native tools. So yeah, there's a lot of things to talk about. And obviously, I would love to hear about your experience and what you've seen work in the wild and what you've seen not working as well.
Yeah.
So before we jump into the actual discussion, I would love to do a little shameless promotion of a white paper that we released on this exact topic just yesterday. So if anybody is interested in an 80-page compilation of all of these data integration methods and their trade-offs with data to back up the benchmarks and the technical instructions on how to set up each of them, then go to this link and get a free copy of it. We probably won't have time to go into detail, but you can find all of the information that you need to set up a data pipeline in this white paper.
Awesome.
And yes, there was a question asking if this was being recorded. The answer is yes, we are recording this, and I'll send out the recording right after we finish. And I'll also send the link to the white paper in the chat, because I'm not going to show this banner throughout the whole session.
Yeah.
So with that said, to kick off the discussion, I would love to start at the higher level topic, which is ingestion strategy. So why do you think it's such an important topic in a modern data stack?
Yeah, I mean, I think some of the big things around that. One, there's just so many things to ingest. For some companies, I think it's very easy. Like, with some of the clients I work with, they have, a handful, 3 or 4 data sources that they really have to pull from, and the data might be small, and it's very easy. And from there, how you get your data in isn't that bad. For other companies, right? Like I've worked with it, maybe their data is very big, so maybe they only have a few data sources, but it's very big. We had that one actually. That's when I started working with Estuary. That's one of the reasons I did. It was a company that they didn't have a lot of data sources, but the data sources that they had were big. It was coming in fast. And so trying to find a way to handle that, make sure you ingest it so you can actually process it quickly, and then actually get to analyzing it so you can rely on it. And then there are just companies that have hundreds of data sources. So I'm realizing I'm running into this more and more. A common situation I have is where companies have to pull in data from 100 external partners, right? Like maybe they're some sort of healthcare company of some sort, and they pull in all these different data sets from hospitals, and they're just all slightly the same or in slightly different data sets. And having to pull that all in can get very hard as you're trying to get it. But it's the first step, right? Like it's the very first step of getting your data often into your data warehouse or data lake house. And so that's why it's kind of important. You need it to be able to happen without you need it to be able to go and process all your data correctly without you having to really think about it. I think that's the biggest thing is, and the biggest thing I push for most people is your ingestion tooling and however you set it up needs to be set up in such a way that it's reliable, and that if things go wrong, and it's resilient and it can handle whatever size of data you are expecting to be thrown at it. And I think those are the things I think about in terms of why it's important, because you want that to almost be not a thing you think about, right? That's the hard part's supposed to be the transformations and the timing of all those transformations. And if you want to build a model, and so you need your ingestion just to be kind of working is the way I think about it.
Right. Yeah. So there's a lot of important pieces of information, I think, in that answer that it would be nice to untangle a little bit. So the first one that I would like to dive a bit deeper is that scenario when there's 100 different tools or data sources that you want to integrate into your Snowflake data warehouse. So when you're faced with such a challenge, do you have a framework in mind that you use to see what ingestion approach you want to use, or how do you approach that?
Yeah, I think when I approach that, the things I consider are, one, obviously cost, right? How if I want to do this myself, what's that going to cost me? Both in terms of if I have to do this, how often, and I have to build a new version of this ingestion script every time. How much is that going to cost me, every time? For example, with a common use case here is SFTPs, right? Okay, if every time we get a new SFTP connection, I have to go in and code something, how much of that is my time, et cetera. And then also maintenance, right? How frequently do these files or sources change? And so that's one space I spend a decent amount of time is cost. Both in terms of my time, if you pick a tool, right? How much is it going to cost for me to do 100 sources? Again, also on that maintenance and reliability aspect of how often does this data change? And if it changes, what should happen and how should I capture that, right? If schema changes, should I break the data pipeline? Can I accept kind of the change in certain ways? And then there's definitely also an aspect of, where do you want to kind of consolidate all of these different data sets? Because often the other challenge when there's 100 different data sources that you're getting, and it is the case where maybe they're all kind of the same data set, but they're slightly, they're coming from different providers. Where do you want to actually get to the place where you create that single data model? I generally prefer to do hey, store it all in separate raw tables, raw partner A, raw partner B, et cetera, and then consolidate. I think that makes it easier. I know some people probably want to do it on the transform or the transform in the extract, but I just tend to find that easier. So you can easily test if the files are bad. But yeah, those are usually kind of the things I start trying to consider when I pick tooling. It's how the one other thing is, especially since I do this for clients, is who do they have on their team that's going to keep manage this, right? Because that plays a role. It's hey, if you have a data engineer, maybe we can go custom. Maybe that's a good option. But if you don't, right? Like, or if you don't have one that has enough time, then we almost have to pick, some sort of solution because you don't have enough time, or you don't want to, invest more in engineering. So, those are usually the things that I start considering.
Right. Yeah, I think that those are, in my eyes, also the most important aspects of choosing an ingestion method. So if we think of the ingestion methods that are available for Snowflake, and let's stick to the native tools for now, which is essentially you can copy files from a stage, you can automate that copy process with Snowpipe. You can use Snowpipe streaming to move data in real time into a database. And I guess you can upload CSVs through the UI as well.
Probably don't do that one if you've got to if you've got a lot of files coming in. Don't do that last one.
I'm sure you can get an AI agent to automate the drag and drop. So,
but is that better than using Snow? I would say, like, is that better than using Snowpipe and just have it in the SQS queue, right? Like, that's the same thing. You're doing the same thing but making it harder. It feels like.
Well, one is AI and the other one is not AI.
I feel like that is something that someone would create via AI. They're like, oh, we used AI, and it just manually goes, or not manually, it automatically goes in and assigns into Snowflake and then loads it. It's like, okay, cool.
Exactly. I see a startup idea there.
Yeah.
And but there's also OpenFlow, which is a fairly new addition to the Snowflake repertoire of data ingestion or data integration tools. And I think that's pretty much everything that I know about.
Yeah.
And I wonder, like, sorry, go ahead.
I was gonna say, other than like third parties, but yeah, exactly.
Yes, yeah. We can also talk about third parties, but I would love to know if you decide to go with a Snowflake native solution, which one do you usually go for, and based on what thought process?
Yeah, I think it kind of, again, goes back to that, like, how many files, how quickly do these files need to be ingested, right? Like, if it's kind of very similar to like the batch versus streaming conversation, right? Because it's like, okay, do I need these immediately? Okay, then we will have to think of one of the snow pipes, right? Because those both can kind of do things rather quickly, and then it becomes how quick and how fast are you making decisions on this? And then it's like, oh, on the other side, do we need these less frequently, and can we just batch these once at one time at night? That's going to be much simpler in terms of like the copy into, just to like backfill if something bad or something incorrect happens. You can quickly look at it and be like, oh, let me either delete that data or backfill or however your process is to run it. It's very easy. Whereas if it's just kind of firing off every time a file gets loaded via Snowpipe, right, you might not be able to catch it, or if you do catch it and then you still have files coming in every 10 minutes, it can be a little bit harder. The other thing that comes into play there, it's not as much anymore on the Snowpipe side, but sometimes with streaming into Snowflake, the cost can get a little bit not egregious, but like can be a little high. It's changed now. Like, Snowflake just changed their Snowpipe costs, so I need to look at that. I know it's simplified and cheaper now, but it's a little. I still need to compare like what that looks like versus doing like just one copy into.
That's definitely an interesting new pricing model for Snowpipe streaming, and I think we only had some cursory benchmarks. But I'm interested in how it translates into large-scale data ingestion scenarios, because my assumption is that it can get pretty expensive very quickly. So I'm not sure it scales that good. But yeah, to be done, or more benchmarks to be done on that side. And you mentioned third-party data integration tools as well. And before we talk more about the individual tools, I'm curious, in your experience, do you see your clients ask more for Snowflake native solutions, or are they usually okay with bringing in a third-party tool and just making sure that it works?
Yeah, I think people are often one, I think if people bring me in, they might not know exactly what the best solution is, right? So they might not even know what the tools are. If they do, I think most of the time they'll talk about third-party solutions in terms of like what they know. OpenFlow is still rather new. People have like looked at it. I've had mixed responses there in terms of like interest or seeing if it works for them. I think there's been more interest from my clients around DBT on Snowflake versus the ingestion on Snowflake. So I think that's something interesting where like everyone I've talked to, maybe I got them onto DBT Cloud or their own local version of DBT in the last 2 years, and now they're like, oh, can we figure out if Snowflake DBT is something we want to try? So I've heard that conversation.
The DBT core projects inside Snowflake, right?
Yeah. Because it's just literally one of the options on your side window. There is like if you open it, it's just right there. It's like DBT, so you can just run that. And so I've had more interest in that versus OpenFlow. At least more conversations with that.
Right. I also heard mixed things about OpenFlow. I am curious. Have you actually had a chance to set it up for anyone?
No. It kind of feels like certain tools out there where it's like, okay, people talked about it, but I haven't seen it and no one's asked for it. And so it's really hard to suggest it when that's the case. And when I've already heard mixed things about it, then you're like, is it something I want to put effort into, or do I just wait at least a year till I start hearing good things about it?
Yeah, exactly. That's my experience as well, and it also applies to Apache NiFi.
Yeah.
I don't know how to properly pronounce it, which is the framework that powers OpenFlow. I don't know if you have any experience with that outside of OpenFlow.
Only the only experience I have is that every time when I will occasionally post an Airflow article, someone will, or some comment about Airflow, someone will be like, oh man, yeah, same thing with me. I'm like Apache NiFi, whichever one it is. They're like, oh man, that was the best. I'm like, I've never come across it personally. Other than people commenting about it. So it's hard, right? Like this is the challenge in the data space, right? Like we have so many options of how you can get data into things like Snowflake, that it's like, how do you keep up with everything?
Yeah, definitely. And if anybody's listening and they have experience with NiFi or NiFi, first of all, I would love to know how to pronounce it. So please let us know. And also when and why you chose it instead of the other options.
Yeah.
Cool. So yeah, with that said, I think we can talk a little bit more about the third-party options, of which there are even more than the native options. Obviously, there's a million of tools, including Estuary as well.
Yeah.
But to maybe try to categorize them, there's tools that deal with real-time data ingestion, tools that deal with batch ingestion. There's open source tools. There's closed source tools. Do you have a go-to tool when you integrate data into Snowflake, or do you always start from scratch and try to map your choice to the specific requirements?
Yeah, sure. I mean, whenever I work with clients, I think I will generally try to do a few things. One, recommend the tools that I like. Two, look at like if there is some genuine new tool or new option out there that I think is good or could be good, and look at that. And then usually the third thing is if they are like natively on a cloud, like just at least consider their cloud option, right? Because it's like usually the cloud option I find tends to be the cheapest. It also tends to be maybe the least feature rich, right? Like it's like good. It might be good enough, but it's going to be more painful is the experience I have every time. I'm like, it'll work. It's not going to be as smooth probably as a tool that focuses 100% on just ingestion, but it'll probably be a little cheaper. And that's kind of what that is. And I kind of get it. I actually have an article coming out. I mean, this is going to be a slight tangent, but I have an article coming out talking about like Databricks. And one of the things I point out is that like Databricks' real competition isn't Snowflake. It is the big cloud providers. It's trying to compete with AWS and Azure, et cetera, et cetera. But that's a different topic for a different day. But yeah, right. Like that's usually how I pick my solution. So, obviously love Estuary. That's something that, one reason that I started partnering with them. So that's usually in there. In terms of maybe trying to think if I build a custom, usually the times I consider custom is again, if it's going to be so chaotic, like I'm going to have so many sources that maybe one of these other solutions is just going to get too expensive. So that could be a place where it's like, can this be cheap enough? Is the data small enough? Because I think that's the other thing. Is like, if your data starts getting big, a custom solution, you have to start building so much more resilience into it that, that can get expensive. If it's like 4,000 rows of data, because I've got a few clients where it's like they get a lot of files, but they're small. It's like, okay, that could be a little cheaper, but if you're getting in, gigabytes or terabytes every day in a very short, cycles there, you need a different solution. But yeah, that's usually how I pick in terms of tooling, and the at least some that I like is, I don't mind the cloud options. They're fine. I always find something to dislike about them when I'm using them. I wrote a post once like, why am I missing SSIS using AWS Glue? But I think it's also just because I forgot how bad SSIS is. So, or at least how painful it is. It shouldn't say bad. It works. It's not like it doesn't work.
Yeah, sometimes you have to remind yourself how bad it used to be to appreciate all the cool things that we have access to now.
Yeah, like having some sort of schema issue in SSAS, like one thing changes and the entire file's like, nope, we are no longer going to work. And you're like, what? yeah.
Painful. But yeah, I mean, so you brought up this build versus buy, well, not argument, but question that almost always comes up when people are looking for new integrations. And I would be curious, when you opt for building something, obviously you have to extract the data from the source somewhere, but to actually push it into Snowflake, do you usually write that part yourself as well? Or would you push it into something like Estuary, for example, push everything into a cloud storage and use a tool like Estuary to move it into Snowflake, or Snowpipe streaming? Or what's the idea there?
Yeah, I mean, if I'm going to go custom, I'll probably go custom all the way. I think the big conversation between build versus buy, at least one of the big arguments always is going to be the vendor lock-in component, right? Like people don't want to get locked in to something that could change in terms of pricing, and I think that's always a fair concern, right? Like we see that certain, like Fivetran just raised their prices again, and so it's not uncommon, right? Like it's what a lot of solutions kind of have to do as they're growing and trying to figure out, how to maximize what they offer. I do always like to point out that like there's always some kind of lock-in no matter what you pick. I think I remember someone pointing this out even with Airflow. It's like, well, if you pick Airflow, right, like you're kind of locked into Airflow regardless, because if you want to migrate to another solution, you're going to have to spend engineering time to switch to it. So there's always some level of engineering lock-in. If someone builds a custom solution, that individual likely has the most information about it, and now you're kind of locked into that individual to a degree. Obviously, you can hire new people, and if it's built well, it'll be great. But if they didn't build it well, right, like, and they leave, you now are going to have to pay someone, and that's happened a lot with me as well, where like I come in, and that's why they've called me in, is like, someone built this, we don't know how it works. Can you just like fix it? And so that's a very frequent reality.
Right. And I feel like there's a lot of things that people don't take into consideration when they evaluate a build versus buy option. I think most engineers approach it on a very surface level, and they just want to see the data appear in Snowflake. And I'm wondering if there's any aspects that you can think of that come out as issues when somebody decides to build their own ingestion pipelines, and there's something that they didn't think of, and it just cascades into this super complex project.
Yeah. I mean, I think there's a lot of little things that just start eating at you, and I think this is something that I imagine estuaries learn over time as well, right? One, schema changes is always a big one. It's small. It's like these small things, right? Like, oh no, someone's data type changed, or oh, this column that existed no longer exists. And those tend to be small things, but tend to cascade pretty quickly. So that's one thing. I think there's a lot of stuff around your data pipelines that you have to build that you might not realize, like logging, so that when you do have something go wrong, it's easy to figure out what went wrong, right? It's very easy to just build a quick script that loads data. It's, probably, get data from API, put it into either a data frame or something, and then, or CSV, and then load it via copy into, or, some bulk load into version of your SQL statement. And wow, it's done. But there's a ton of things in there, right? Like, what if some of the data is wrong? What if, the wrong data type? If you get a file that's doesn't have a header, it's headerless, right? Like, then you have to deal with that. If maybe some of the columns get switched around, which will happen more frequently than you'd like. I think those are all little things. And then, of course, the size is the other side of things. Size and speed, or obviously like velocity and volume, can come into play too, where it's like maybe you don't have enough compute on wherever you're running it to get to such a size that it can load it properly, or there's so many things that can go wrong as things start getting more complex, and that you won't consider when you're loading a single file, but you're going to start getting hit when you have 1,000 files that are all 100 megabyte plus, or several gigabytes. That can all get pretty hairy.
Right. Yeah. And like in light of all of those challenges, I'm curious if you were advising a team of some data engineers, like 5 to 10 data people in a team, when would you actually recommend them to build their own data ingestion instead of buying a ready to be used tool? Does it all come down to pricing, or is there other aspects to that decision?
Yeah, I mean, pricing is obviously a big thing. I think time is another thing. Like, how much time is it going to take you? I don't think ingestion is it doesn't yield that much ROI when you think about it. You're like, okay, you ingest the data, unless obviously there's like some value in getting that data in quickly, and maybe you have a way to get it in faster. The goal is to get that data in accurately, reliably, without having any issues, and that's it, right? Like, from there, the actual value kind of starts, your whatever your transforms are. And so to me, ingestion should just work. So if, like, when you're trying to make that decision, it's like, do you want to spend time on doing something that has probably a lower yield in terms of overall value, or do you not? If you have the engineering capacity, that can make sense, right? Like, you've got a 100-person data engineering team, that, yeah, obviously putting a few data engineers on it can make sense. If you've got a 2-person data engineering team, you probably want to spend more of your time on the actual transforms, on working with the business, versus trying to figure out, hey, how do I ingest this data? Because it's going to feel fine, but what happens is, we've ingested data from this ERP. We've written some custom code to parse the data out. It's got its own API. Great. 6 months later, they switch out the ERP, and now you've got to rebuild all of that anyways. So, and that's not abnormal. I've had that happen where, like, on a project, no one tells you, and then suddenly the CEO is like, we don't like this ERP anymore, and you just spent a month or two building some stuff, and now they're like, well, I got to rebuild some of this. I can keep maybe the data model, but how we're ingesting it has to be updated. So I think those are all things you should consider.
We used to call that job security when I was a data engineer.
It's why I like to tell most people, like, you'll do a migration every few years, because it's like, it's true. Like, either you're going to migrate because someone changes the source system, or you're going to change because someone decides they want a new cloud, or you're going to change because someone wants a new data warehouse, or you're going to change because someone wants a new BI tool, and all these things impact what you're doing, and you have to migrate. So
yeah, I totally agree. And I think you touched on the key point that I always try to make, is that thousands of data engineers wrote the exact same data pipeline that extracts data from HubSpot through the API and loads it into Snowflake. And I feel like, as you said, the value is not there. It has been done so many times with so many tools or so many frameworks, like pure Python, whatever, Meltdown or DLT, any framework that you can imagine. Yeah. But writing it again and again is not business value creation. The value comes downstream, and the ingestion pipeline should just work and get the data to you at the cadence that you need it for downstream use cases. And I totally agree with that.
Yeah. I just think about how many times I've had to write like Salesforce connectors, or all these connectors over and over again, had to deal with SOAP and various things, and you're like, this shouldn't be repeated this frequently. Yeah, we should try to figure out a way to do this in a way that's cost effective, and
yeah, and these source systems and the destination systems, including Snowflake, changes over time. So your job essentially becomes maintaining these pipelines that you could just outsource to a third-party service and focus on building the data models downstream, or the AI applications that actually require novel thoughts. And cool. But there's one more topic that I would love to dive a little bit deeper into, which is the total cost of ownership. So in my experience, when people compare tools, open source tools, to closed source tools, or building something themselves versus buying something, they only see the sticker price or the platform price and only compare those two. So, for example, Estuary costs so much or so and so to move data from Postgres to Snowflake. But if I build the pipeline myself using an open source tool, my cost is zero. And I'm curious what you think about that comparison.
Yeah, I was talking to someone at the Data Happy. I'm trying to remember who I was talking to about this, but we were talking about it, and it's funny how much we think engineering time is free. I think it's just like it's already paid for in most people's budgets. So the assumption is, well, this engineer is here, I might as well have them build something. So I think that's kind of why it's like, oh, it's either open source and so it must be free. Obviously, the thing you'll often hear in the tech world is like open source is free, like a puppy is free, right? Like there's some level of like you gotta maintain it. Like it's not just gonna run. There are some solutions that like pretty much work out of the box, and you're gonna probably have a fine time with it, and the cost will be minimal compared to one or the other. But yeah, if there's engineering time, if it's going to cost more time to use some of these solutions, that should be considered, right? Like you should at least consider like, hey, I'm going to lose, a quarter of an FTE a year on whatever it might be. And you should kind of have a general idea. Like Airflow is one of those that I have where I'm like, look, do you have at least a quarter or half an FTE just in case? Like maybe you only have like 4 data pipeline jobs. And honestly, then the question becomes, why are you using Airflow? But let's say you have 100, things are going to go wrong. Things are going to break. And you should just assume that some of that time of an engineer is going to be on that. Otherwise, you're kidding yourself, because things will go wrong. However you set things up.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. And you also have to run that Airflow instance somewhere. You also have to set up monitoring. You also have to set up logging. There are probably services that also have a cost attached to them. And I think another thing that most people overlook is that you have to invest in the knowledge itself. Like you have to be able to operate Airflow or any other tool that you wish to use to do this integration. And that investment into learning the tool also comes out of engineering time, which, as you said, is probably the biggest expense in most data teams.
Yeah. No, there's a lot of different ways that things I think you need to just worry about and you need to consider, right? There's just a lot of different costs that can occur besides just your what you're paying for in a solution.
Yeah, exactly. And I'm curious, I know that Snowflake offers native connectors to some SaaS services like Salesforce. Do you have any experience with those?
Yeah, I think for me, usually what I've used there, I've used like the Snowflake data sharing. So I've used like for HubSpot, I've used data sharing. And that's nice because on one side, right, like you just kind of get the data into your data warehouse, and that's really smooth. I haven't used maybe more of the connectors that natively exist, more of the data sharing. The one thing I comment with the HubSpot data sharing, at least this was the one I pulled in, was that all the objects come in one table. So it's like very heavily normalized. So you have to kind of parse out everything from contacts to certain components from there. So you get like a few big tables, and then you have to figure out how to parse it all out into the actual tables you need.
Right. And I assume that there's a lot of like limitations on how these integrations work. Like I don't know how well they could handle schema evolution, for example, or is the data real time at all?
Yeah, so I know with like data sharing, I remember that I think we would have tables that were like, I'm trying to remember what the split. I feel like there was two different types of tables. There was one that was a little more real time, and then one that was more batch. Um, so there is some level of that. I haven't used the actual Snowflake native connector, so I don't know how they handle schema changes or things like that. Hope I would hope that they're somewhat okay there, but that's hard to know everything.
Right, yeah, and that is actually something that I also wanted to talk about. So these data shares are all kind of related to how query federation works, which is another way of getting data into Snowflake. Like similarly, or like a practical application could be how iceberg tables, you are able to query iceberg tables from Snowflake, or query some other databases that are connected. And I'm curious in general, not necessarily Snowflake in terms of Snowflake, but what do you think about these query federation style of ETL?
Yeah, I mean, one, I do at least like the idea. I think because at Facebook we had some similar capabilities there where we could kind of query across to different sources essentially. And honestly, it's not generally that new. You could often do like connected databases. I remember in like SQL Server, we would connect to Oracle and you could pull in data that way as well. So to me, it's not a like crazy concept. You often have some sort of cost in terms of like performance, depending on, you probably can't store the data the same way, depending on where you're storing it. And those are often things you have to consider if you're going to cross systems. But I think the idea makes sense. I imagine at the end of the day, you're still going to want to move your data into wherever they need to live. If you're doing some like continuous process on it all the time, right? Like it's great for like ad hoc at answering questions or maybe doing a quick prototype. But eventually you want to kind of put it where you want it, like where it's going to run consistently, so you don't incur as much in terms of cost.
Yeah, I feel like there was a period of when zero ETL was very popular, and it seemed like the holy grail solution of not having to move data around, and you can just skip all of these data integration tools completely. But it kind of sounds like it didn't really live up to the promise, right?
Yeah, I mean, I think the big thing is like I always called it like zero EL, right? Like it's like, look, at best, and most and the company that pushed it harder was Amazon and AWS, and it's like it makes sense, right? Like, yeah, if you've got Redshift there and you've got Postgres, you should make that easy to pull in. It's kind of like data sharing to a degree, but maybe slightly different. And that's something that again, like Databricks and Snowflake are kind of setting up to do with their recent purchases, like Crunchy Data and Neon. Right? Like there is, I imagine, some goal to just be like, hey, we should just be able to own this data completely. And I don't know when that's going to come into play. Again, this is something I'm putting in my article about specifically Databricks, but Snowflake has a similar thing where I can see them wanting to own those databases because when I pull data, especially for a lot of startups and smaller companies, they often have like one data source, like one main data source. It's like a Postgres instance. I think it's Postgres most frequently, more frequently than MySQL. But you have that, and then that is like that represents most of your business, right? Like it's whatever it might be, orders or whatever your business is, and then you just push it into wherever you want to push it into. So I can see that being something they want to do in the future, and they might be able to set that up. But there's also still the T. I think there's always this T. There's always the transform that kind of gets like, well, you probably aren't going to skip that, right? Like it's not like you magically get rid of this step. A lot of these data sets that are in databases are not set up to answer questions historically, aren't integrated across different data sets. I was just having a conversation where it was like, hey, we want to pull in data from source A and source B, and we want to answer questions about them. And then you figure out, well, in source B, we thought we had a field that we could connect it to source A, and we don't. And so, there's all these other points that come into play besides just moving the data into your data warehouse. That's not the only thing that you need to do. So.
Yeah. I always say that ELT is the same as ETL because you have to transform the data. There's no way not to transform it.
I think the one argument that can be made is that you get the data into your raw or wherever you want to call it area, like staging area, and then data scientists can maybe do some quicker ad hoc analysis to see if it's worthwhile to transform, which that can be a benefit. But that T is there. It's going to happen somewhere. You're going to spend time on it. It's not like there's no time saving there. It's like you're going to spend time on it one place or the other. It's going to be the same transform. And then there's always the other joke of like, well, it's often like ELTL. TLTTTL, or ETL, TTL, you're going to do more, you're going to process it more. It's not going to just stop after one step.
Yeah, exactly. And that's what we see at Estuary as well, that like we do have transformations, the option to add transformations in flight before the data lands in the warehouse. And more users are opting to do some level of data cleaning or transform or like restructuring it a little bit, even joining them before actually landing it into the data warehouse and doing the heavier computations. Cool. So the last topic that I wanted to ask about is around the right time aspect of data integration into Snowflake. So right time is a category of data integration that unifies real time and batch and aspires to get rid of the trade-off between the two. So real time has historically been considered expensive and complicated, while batch data ingestion was considered cheap and easy to set up, but also obviously you work with delayed data. So I'm curious what you think of a unified approach, and do you think that it makes sense in a real life use case? And in general, your take on real-time data ingestion for Snowflake?
Yeah, I mean, I think the one thing that I find interesting about the idea of like right time is that I have had plenty of clients that often tell me like, we want real time data, right? Like everyone wants it, and maybe they think they'll use it. And in Estuary's case, what's been nice there is I've had now multiple situations where I'm like, hey, let's turn it on, let's see what it looks like. And often what they find is like, oh wow, we're spending a lot on Snowflake, right? Because you're like loading that data in every second, right? Like, and then it's like, do you want to be paying, right? Like I like to tell people like on an extra small, right? It's 72 hours. It's like $72 about a day for an extra small, ends up almost $3,000 a month. Is that what you want to spend for loading this data? Is that worthwhile? Or could I just switch it to like load every hour? And then you're going to see it cut, not by like half, you're going to see it cut by several times, right? What you're paying there, because of, if you batch it in, it's considerably cheaper. So I think that's something I like to think about with most people, or try to help people kind of go through. Like, obviously, I try to get them before we actually get down into ingesting real time. But if they really still are like, we really want to try real time, I'm like, all right, let's try it. And if you have the right tools, it makes it really easy to kind of show the difference in terms of like, were you doing anything different? Were you making different decisions because that data was real time, and you're spending almost $3,000 a month, or would you prefer to spend $500 or $1,000 or something in that range? And get that data maybe loaded once a day or every hour or something. And I think that's something that people need to consider, because when you think about right time, it's thinking about what that data is actually for. I think it kind of forces you to have that conversation of like, what's this data actually for? What decisions do we want to make? Those are the conversations you need to have. Like, what is the actual right time? I think someone once posted this on as a comment. They were like, the right time or real time data for CEOs or whoever your end user is exactly when they need it. So you just got to figure out what that is, because most of the time it's like we have a board meeting at 8 a.m. on Tuesdays. We just need the data to be up to date that day, and then we don't care, honestly, the rest of any other day. So yeah.
I totally agree. I think approaching it from the business value creation perspective is the right thing to do for right time data integration. And one thing that I'm super excited about in the future for Snowflake is that I see more and more types of workloads being moved to the data warehouse, like a lot of AI, a lot of machine learning. And once you start building recommendation systems, for example, in your data warehouse in Snowflake, then I think it starts to make sense to move more towards a real-time data integration. I've seen a lot of cases where people actually use Snowflake as an operational data warehouse, a customer-facing data warehouse, or a customer that powers customer-facing reports. And there, of course, you cannot afford to have late arriving data. So yeah, it's going to be definitely interesting in the future to see where we end up.
Yeah. I actually had a client recently, something similar where they're using it to kind of report externally. And I was surprised because they found it was the faster part was probably because they need to add some indexes on Postgres, but they're also finding it was cheaper than running, obviously, like, because it's either you're running something like on RDS, like a Postgres RDS, 100% of the time, or you're just running a query whenever you need it. On Snowflake. And so they're like, wow, it's way cheaper. It's like, well, yeah, kind of. Like if you don't actually need it 100% of the time, that might make some sense. So
yeah, exactly. Cool. With that thought, I would love to open up the floor to anybody from our audience, in case anybody has questions that they want to ask, either from me or from Ben, about data integration for Snowflake or about Estuary. I'm happy to answer anything about the platform too. So I'll wait a few seconds until people write their questions in case there's anything. I saw that somebody said that Wi-Fi should rhyme, or Ni-Fi should rhyme with Wi-Fi, but in Europe it's Wi-Fi. That's an interesting
Wi-Fi, Ni-Fi. Yeah, there's a lot of tools like that. Every once in a while, I'm like, I actually have never heard anyone say this name. I've just read it 1,000 times, and I've never said it out loud. And now I don't want to sound like I've never read about it. Then you hope whatever YouTube video you've watched had the accurate saying too. You're like, I don't know, that's what I heard.
It is a very important choice how to name your product. Estuary is not easy to pronounce, but at least it is kind of unique in terms of in the data word.
It's unique, but it kind of suffers from the same thing DBT suffers from, where it's like, if you Google it, no one's gonna find it. You have to Google estuary data, like you used to have to Google DBT data.
So our goal is that, or in my mind, is that if Amazon could do it and they show up as the first result, then why can't we do it? So soon, if you search for estuary, it will be the first result.
Yes, we'll have to make that happen. That'll be fun.
Yeah. So in lieu of comments, as a closing statement from my side, at least, I would love to talk again about the white paper that we published yesterday that has all of the technical details of all of these data ingestion tools that we talked about now with Ben. We go into detail when to use batch, micro batch, streaming, real time, when to use native solutions, third-party solutions, how the cost is different between these tools. We give you a framework to see if you're ready for a real-time data ingestion, or you should stick with batch for now. So I definitely recommend checking it out. It's a light read of 80 pages. So it's perfect for the weekend or the holiday season.
you need to create like a ChatGPT. Just give it to ChatGPT to answer all your questions. Summarize it for me.
Yeah, exactly. That's how it works today, right? Yes, you put in the effort to create content, and people just use AI to summarize it. So
yep, yeah, sadly.
It is what it is. But yeah, so please check that out. And I don't know, Ben, if you have any closing statements about data integration, data ingestion for Snowflake.
I don't know if I have anything closing. I think it was a great conversation. There's a lot of different ways you can skin a cat, obviously, or whatever the more maybe friendly saying would be. Somebody's going to get friendlier saying. But yeah, I think the big thing for me is specifically on ingestion. My goal is always to try to make it something that I just can rely upon, and I don't have to think about it. As long as it just works, that's what I want. I'm like, I just want it to work. I want it to fit whatever team size I have or whatever budget I have. and I'm not going to look for a tool that maybe promises a lot, but if delivers very little. So
I think that's that would be a good thought to end it on. But I saw that we had a question coming in from Abi asking if Informatica is a good solution to enable batch processing of data between S3 and Snowflake. Do you have any thoughts on that, Ben? I know you're a big Informatica fan, right?
Yeah, no, I've not had to actually pull that specific use case where I ingest data with specifically Informatica from S3 to Snowflake. I mean, what's really nice about S3 and Snowflake is you can integrate those pretty easily without any tool. So this kind of goes back to the batch versus micro batch versus streaming conversation, where it's like, if you just need to load a file once a day and you're pretty confident on how that file is structured, I mean, you can probably get away with the copy into, and that'll probably be fine. You lose a little bit on maybe having as good of error handling. You can put some in there, but you don't have maybe as rich of error handling because you're kind of limited to SQL. But if you just need to get it in there and it's daily, it's a fast, easy way to do it.
Yeah, I totally agree. And I think specifically for or between S3 and Snowflake, I would usually go for the built-in solutions. Like Snowpipe is an amazing way to automate ingesting from an S3 stage, and usually works for most cases.
Yeah. Save yourself $1 million contract. It's why bring in Informatica if you can avoid it? So,
exactly.
If that's the only thing you need it for. If you have other things to use it for, maybe that's a different discussion. But if that's why you're pulling it in, don't.
Yeah, I think in general it's a good advice to use something else than Informatica.
Especially now that Salesforce has bought them, it's not gonna get better. So, well, I shouldn't say that. Suppose it might not get better. It might get better.
Yeah, we'll see what the future holds.
We'll see. We have no way of knowing.
There was another question from Ali that I put up here on the screen. Is it generally better to build source ingestion pipelines that are tightly coupled to each individual file source, or to implement a more generic decoupled ingestion framework?
Yeah. This is where things start to get hard, right? Like if you have to ingest 100 different file types. I often find you can create a generic ingestion component, right? Like maybe that can be somewhat generic. Like you can often give it either some sort of schema file. Some people call them data contracts. I actually have a project right now where that's kind of where you've got a file that defines the schema. And so when you load that file, you check this JSON or YAML file, and you're like, hey, does this have the fields that I want? Are they the right data types? Are they in the right order? And that's really all that script does. But you still have to create a more unique file that's, again, that schema file or data contract. But the load component can be generic. And then that just loads it in. And then from there, you have to do a transform. The downside there, obviously, is if the file changes and you want to be able to adapt to file changes, that'll be hard. You've created a very restrictive approach. So you've got this limitation. That's again, one reason I do like things like estuaries. If in some cases where I don't want things to fail and I just want them to load, specifically more like new columns. If you add new columns, I don't want you to break. I want you to just continue to load. Then you have to code all that yourself, or you could pick a solution. But yeah, that's how I would do it. You'll create a generic ingestion script and then a unique schema file check. Or a data contract, essentially.
Yeah, I can only echo all of that. And I would also like to add maybe that surprisingly, in a lot of cases, if you go to the data provider upstream, you can get them to use another format or another structure for the files that you are trying to ingest, and make your own life easier that way.
Yeah, never feel bad trying. I've worked at so many companies where they're like, oh, we don't want to ask, and it's just ask because this sucks. They're sending it to me in whatever data file format they think works, and now I've got to deal with XML, and it's the first time everything else is CSV, and then there's this one that's sending it to me in XML. I'm like, why are you sending me XML? Everyone else is sending CSV, and now I have to create a whole ingestion path just for that. So
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, it's nice to try to avoid that, but yeah, as we know, our whole field is built on not being able to avoid these types
I feel
of.
like that's a great way of describing data engineering. It's like our whole field exists because nothing is standardized.
Yeah,
That's why that's like not the only reason, but that's like a massive reason why we exist. Is because someone has to make it easy for other people to use on the other side. And that's what we do.
Exactly. All right. Well, I think if there are no other questions, then thank you so much, Ben, for joining. And yeah, the webinar will be sent out to the recording will be sent out to everyone. So in case you missed the first half, then you can catch up. And also you will get a link to the white paper as well to see every piece of technical detail that we didn't have time to touch on today.
Yeah.
All right. Thank you so much. And thank you everyone as well for watching this, and have a nice rest of your weeks.
Thank you all.
Bye-bye.
Bye.